He is the only man in this country, or at least AFL country, that hasn't got an opinion on this. He's not a tribunal man. Welcome to you, Dr. Hoyne.
Hello, G. Hello, Kane. Not much happening, is there?
No, it's a quiet weekend.
I feel like a little bit out of my depth actually being in here tonight, given everything that's coming through. I don't know how you guys have handled it for the last 48 hours or so.
Have you got a view?
No.
Okay, I didn't think you would.
No, I'm not getting into that at all, G.
Can I ask you a question, footy related? And I think I've asked you this before. Missed tackles, do you track them? I think you do. And were there more missed tackles from one team than we've seen in a long time at the Gabba on Saturday night?
No, we do track them, and we have been tracking them for the best part of 10 years. In terms of what Port Adelaide did, which I'm assuming that you're alluding to there, Kane. And I saw your deep diving analysis on Sunday Footy Show. So their tackle efficiency, if you like, on Saturday night against Brisbane, wasn't one of their better performances. Put it that way. But we have seen worse performances, but that wasn't.
Do you track incorrect umpiring decisions?
You've been asking this for years, Joe.
Two sliding ones on Thursday night.
Pushing the back.
Shocking. I've given up on the pushing the back. Shocking on Friday and inconsistent Saturday. How do you think they went, Kane?
There was one insufficient intent decision. I reckon it was in the Thursday night game that has been paid all year.
Yep.
Straight to the boundary line, and they didn't pay it. I was like, this is going to be a rough weekend. We've heard a lot about expected scores. Luke Hodge was big on it last night.
It was as if it's the first time he's ever heard about it.
Hoyne, he was fascinated by it. I think 3 results would have been different and Port Adelaide would have lost by 2 points, he said. Is that accurate? And what's your overall observation on that?
Yeah, so I was, obviously tuning in on Friday to, a lot of radio discussion around the Thursday night game, and it appeared to me that it was either the Braden Maynard discussion or the expected scores discussion, based off what the Melbourne camp were coming out and saying post that game on Thursday night. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context in terms of how we should be using and referencing expected scores. And accuracy, and we've talked about accuracy on this show all year. Accuracy is a significant component of the game and shouldn't be dismissed. And it shouldn't be as simple as, if Melbourne had have kicked accurately, they would have won. Because accuracy is, as I said, a significant component. How we treat it is it's a guide, and to be used as a guide in terms of assessing whether or not your game is in good enough shape. So from a coach's box perspective, your job, I would have thought, is to develop a system, both offensively and defensively, which is there to generate the shot at goal and there to restrict the opposition from generating the shot at goal. So, so Simon Goodwin and his coaches have generated a system where that allows Bailey Fritsch to have that shot at goal in the last quarter. It's not up to them whether or not Bailey Fritsch actually kicks that goal. So the system is in place to generate that shot at goal. If Jamie Elliott kicks a shot at goal from the boundary 60 metres out, your system's in place to restrict the opposition from actually generating an easy shot. You'll force them to generate a really hard shot. Well done, Jamie Elliott, for kicking that goal. So that's how it should be used. It shouldn't just be as simple as, Melbourne should have won that game, if you like. It's, that is a significant factor, in terms of the overall outcome of that game.
So clearly Simon Goodwin after the game would have been looking for the positives, and the positives is exactly
100%.
Don't panic, boys. We've got some injuries, but have a look how our system stood up.
Let's get to work on what we actually did in front of goal. But in terms of an overall system perspective, we did a lot right. So, we've heard, I heard Chris Scott mention this in the 2019 qualifying final as well when they lost to Collingwood. He straight away mentioned expected scores. Don't panic, don't panic, don't panic. And then the week after, they win a final by 5 goals. So that's how it should be used. It's a coaching tool to be able to go back to your group and just reiterate that your system is in good enough shape despite the poor accuracy that you've actually had. So, and then just the final one with accuracy, and I'm so big on it, especially in finals time. So the last 5 years, accuracy decides 1 in every 4 finals over the last 5 years. In the home and away series over the last 5 years, it decides 1 in every 9 games. It is such a significant factor in this final series, and and as you said, Kane, at the top, it has already been a significant component in this final series.
1 in 9.
1 in 9 in the home and away series is decided by accuracy, down to 1 in 4 in finals. It is significant.
Huge.
Some players can cope with it and others can't, and we saw many examples of that over the weekend. All right, let's get to your talking points, Hoyne. Let's start with the Pies.
Yeah, so I think what's been lost in the discussion around the Thursday night game is, obviously around the Brayshaw and Maynard discussion, and then the Melbourne entry discussion, and then the expected scores discussion, was actually what Collingwood did in the first 40 minutes of that game. And I thought the way Collingwood played in that first 40 minutes, I haven't seen Collingwood play like that for months. I thought that was close to as good a footy that they've played since the start.
What do you like about it?
So we all know that there's two words that Melbourne focus in on: defence and contest. And for the first 40 minutes to be plus 10 in contested footy and completely take that away from them was significant. Their pressure, 200 pressure rating in the first 40 minutes compared to Melbourne's 175. For Melbourne to have 18 inside 50s in 40 minutes and to
Collingwood?
Melbourne. Yeah, so for Melbourne to have 18 inside 50s in 40 minutes and to score once, only from a downfield free kick in 18 minutes, that defensive performance was exceptional. To score 25 points to 0 off turnover. We talk about the turnover game all the time. That was exceptional against the number one turnover team for the entire season. And just a couple of players I just want to just give a significant shout out, because that first 40 minutes, that's where the game was won, and that's why Collingwood are sitting back and favourite to reach a grand final now. So Taylor Adams' finals record over the last 5-6 years has been exceptional. 7 contested possessions in 40 minutes. Still side bottom, playing as a winger. 8 contested possessions in 40 minutes. Unheard of for a winger. And then Jack Crisp, his finals record is superb as well. In the first 40 minutes of that game, 10 disposals, 3 clearances, and kicked a goal to kickstart things. So that was as close to a complete performance that I think deserves a little bit more recognition and a little bit more praise than potentially what they have actually received. A lot of the talk has been, how did Melbourne blow it? But for Collingwood to get to a 27-point lead in that 40-minute period was absolutely exceptional on their behalf.
So how much of it was, and this is your next point, how much of it was Collingwood good defensively, but Melbourne's structure offensively poor? And we've all got the visions of them bombing deep from the centre square, almost inside 50, that were never going to do any damage.
Yeah, I think the two go hand in hand. But I think what I wanted to sort of talk about is more, just purely looking at it from a Melbourne perspective. And what is the problem? Is the problem the entries, or is the problem the targets? And I think when you do a deeper dive on it, throughout the whole season, and in particular on Thursday night, to me, it's the entries and the type of entries that they're actually generating. So they bombed the ball inside 50 38 times on the weekend. When we're talking about bombing, that means that you're not looking for one individual target. You are just bombing to a contest inside your forward 50. We have not seen a team do that for 12 years. 38 times they bombed it inside 50.
Only worked once in a final.
Haven't seen that for 12 years.
Snake Baker was on the end of them. That was about 1977. North Melbourne. Long bombs to Snake. Have you got stats, speaking of bombing, of players from 50 metres out feigning they're going for a shot, kicking it to the so-called hot spot, which is in reality the cold spot most of the time?
No, we haven't.
Can you do that one
do a deeper dive on it. But
what it works about 1 in 10.
But so then I just want to break down the player component to it. So if you're looking at it from a Melbourne side of things in terms of the individuals, Neil Bullen, when it's in Neil Bullen's hands, things happened. He goes to a target inside 50 80% of the time.
Right.
So AFL average is 60% of the time compared to you bombing it compared to going to a target. He goes 80% of the time. So huge tick. But then the likes of Viney, the likes of Oliver, the likes of Petrarca are all miles below AFL average in terms of how often they bomb it inside 50 compared to how often they go to a target inside 50. So
that's a really strong revelation, because I suspect most people would think particular Petrarca is a creative beast going inside forward 50.
No, he's not. So as I said, he's bombing it inside 50 far more than he's actually going to an actual target inside 50. So I think that's the issue to me. And it just looks like as I said, we constantly hear them talk about contest and defence. So then you go inside 50 at any cost. So then you can set up behind it. And that's why your time in forward half numbers are so strong. Your inside 50 numbers are so strong because then it's so hard to get out.
Yeah.
But in terms of the return that you're getting in there, it's just not, it's just not coming through. So to put that into context, 69 inside 50s, AFL average in terms of score that you get from that is 126 points that you get from that. So it is an interesting discussion as a whole. And Kane, I'll ask you this question as well. If it's like, we are a win-loss industry. So, as I said at the start, you can't just, fob off the accuracy component. But just playing hypothetical, for instance, if Melbourne take their opportunities in front of goal, and the score is 70 to 56, which is what it was based on expected scores, are we actually talking about the inside 50 component this week? Or are we actually looking at going, geez, how good's their forward half return?
Yeah.
How good's their forward half game?
Exactly right. But we do that a lot, don't we?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's all part of your football program. If you've got players that aren't able to finish in front of goal, that is part of your program. So you have to be accountable for that as coaches as well. I look at Port Adelaide kicking 0 goals, 5 from easy, not just set shots, easy set shots. I'm going, well, Port Adelaide fans are going to lose their mind at Ken Hinkley if Port Adelaide go out in straight sets. And he has to be accountable for that because that's part of your football program. Have you got the right goal kicking processes? Have you got the right people teaching it? So whilst it's, we do let coaches off a little bit for accuracy reasons, I think it's all part of the discussion that they need to be accountable for, as harsh as that may sound. And Hoyne, Gerard asked you a question before the latest break. How concerning is the number of entries that Collingwood were able to generate?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a concern. And I like what Craig McRae said post-game, though, that sometimes you just need to win. Yeah. Sometimes you just need to win and you just need to get through, and that's all that they did. But, every club is looking...
Didn't he say bugger the data? I'm not interested in what the data says. I'm just interested in winning.
I wouldn't have been interested in that either post-game after you've just put yourself through to a prelim. But in saying that as well, though, that, clubs are ripping into this post-game, and he'll be looking at going, okay, if we generate 37 entries over the next 2 weeks, we're probably not going to be a realistic chance of holding up that cup. So, they did a truckload right, as we said. Defensively, they were superb. They would be looking at ways in which they can generate more than 37 entries. We've talked about their inside 50 numbers over the last couple of months. That is a bit of a watch for them. Over the next couple of weeks, and that'll be absolutely across that for sure.
All right, let's move on to the Blues, who scored a different way, didn't they?
Yeah, so hats off to Carlton here. Clearly this game heading into it was one of the more easier games to sort of analyse. It was the contest and stoppage game of Carlton compared to the turnover and ball movement game of the Swans. So for Carlton to really have their stoppage games sort of taken away from them in the first quarter in particular, where I think Sydney won 11 of the last 12 clearances to end that first quarter, but to still go in with close to a 2-goal lead, and then to overall to win the turnover game, against the 6th best turnover team in the competition was a huge positive there for Carlton.
And to do it without Curnow being an import.
Yeah, correct. So, and that was the first time where they've actually won that aspect of the game for close to 2 months. So that was a significant sort of positive for them. Their ability to be able to sort of hold up in this phase of the game would be a huge positive.
Yeah.
So this might sound like a negative, but there were 159 turnovers in that game that Carlton played in, which was the most that Carlton have actually played in a game this year. Again, that might sound like a negative, but that's a huge positive. I mean, that's finals footy where the ball is ping-ponging. There are countless mistakes. There isn't that sort of perfection footy, if you like.
Yeah.
So for Carlton to be able to hold up off the back of what they were able to do with the likes of Sard and Newman and Wiedering and McGovern behind the ball, that's a huge positive that we were looking for. And a fantastic achievement there for Carlton.
So you can correct, it doesn't happen often. I think the Eagles are one of the very few that have changed the way their pre-finals map looked, in particular with contested possession, to win the flag.
You can. So they've won. So they won the turnover game against Sydney, huge tick. But there are still improvements, in terms of which they can actually focus in on. They still gave up 49 points from turnover themselves. So there is, some room for improvement there. What they do this week in that phase of the game is going to be really interesting. Against a team this year which has been one of the hardest teams to score against in this phase of the game. It's going to be fascinating to watch.
All right, what did you see with the Giants?
So there's a lot of similarities for me with GWS in terms of what they're delivering in 2023 compared to what Collingwood delivered in 2022. And what I mean by that is that it took Collingwood 2.5 months into the season last year to get rolling. So under a new coach. So so they were 4-5 after round 9, hovering around about that 10th or 11th position, and then they went on their run to almost get to grand final day. And they did that off the back of a team who, at that stage of the year, were averaging 25 years age, if you like, and then 83 games worth of experience. So they had that nice balance. GWS this year took 2.5 months to get rolling into their season under a new coach, and their age profile was 25 years per player and 87 games per player. And you think back to Collingwood last year, and some of their best players were in the prime age bracket of their careers. So, Taylor Adams, Jack Crisp, Darcy Moore, Jordan De Goey, Braden Maynard, Brodie Myercheck, just to name a few. And then you go to GWS, and GWS have got Toby Green and Cornelio and Whitfield and Kelly and Hogan and these guys that are in the peak of their powers as well. So the fact that we've now, sort of seen what the system is like under Adam Kingsley, which right now, at the moment, profile for profile, they have the best profile in the competition at the moment. So how far they can go from starting from 7th and having to travel on the road 4 weeks in a row, who knows? Whether or not the travel side of things gets them.
I see Blighty put that into perspective today, Kane, over in Adelaide. Called Adelaide's Hooky Lalas because look what the Giants are doing with their travel requirements.
Yeah, obviously they've won 11 games in 11 different venues this year. But no one knows in terms of what the travel side of things is going to do throughout a whole month of September. But taking away the travel side of things, to be the second best team in the competition at turning possession into a score, and to be the hardest team in the competition to do that against, that is the game in a nutshell. Yep. There is no one that has that balance at the moment like what GWS do. So, it's going to be fascinating to see how far they can go, whether or not they can get past Port Adelaide this week, and if they do, how
You're tipping them against Port Adelaide?
I'd be tipping them against Port Adelaide, yeah, I'd be tipping them against Port. So
what about the Melbourne Blues game?
Melbourne for me. Yeah, I'm a bit. I don't know. I think I'm a bit the same as you, Kane. And maybe I'm going a little bit crazy, but I've just got a lot of faith in what Melbourne do.
A lot of faith in Melbourne. I think they might still be there on grand final day up against Collingwood, but time will tell. Now let's go to the Lions, who kicked 13 goals from stoppage. Hoyne, surely that impressed you?
Yeah, no, it did. I mean, offensively they are probably the most pure and most damaging team in the competition. I probably think that we can all agree on that, which is why the contest side of the game against Brisbane is enormous. So you look, across the whole year this year, and they have a great starting point, Brisbane. The fact that you need to win contested possession by at least double figures against Brisbane to be a chance. So to win it, so if you win contested possessions against Brisbane by double figures, Brisbane are one win from 6 games. Right. If you don't win it by double figures, so Brisbane can still lose it by 9, 8, 7, whatever it is. So it's a fair starting point. They are 17-1. 17-1. And the reason is, if you give them a chance in that side of the game, because they are so pure with what they do with ball in hand, it is almost game over. And Port Adelaide, competed reasonably well in that side of the game. They won contested footy by 3. But it wasn't enough because they still gave Brisbane a chance with ball in hand to be able to actually execute with maximum damage. And there's just one player that I just want to just give a little bit of credit to what sort of he has been able to do over the last 6-7 weeks, and that's Hugh McCluggage. So everyone's talking about his game on the weekend, which is fair enough. He was absolutely sensational. But sometimes through injury, and we saw this with West Coast in 2018 when Andrew Gaff went out. Sometimes with injury, some really good things can happen to other individuals. And I think McCluggage in a way, and I hope this doesn't sound bad, has actually benefited from Ashcroft going out. So whilst Ashcroft was in the team, he was spending about a third of his game on the wing. Since Ashcroft has gone out, he's played 1% of his game on the wing, and his game has gone to another level through his contest and clearance work. So, if I had said to you, Kane and Gerard, at the start of the year, with the addition of Josh Dunkley, who was brought in for finals, if I had said at the start of the year that their first final that they would play, the two of them would only sort of combine for 7 clearances, I would have thought that's a bit of a concern in terms of what the end result is going to be. And really, offensively, both of them didn't really have too much impact. I would have thought that would be a bit of a concern. But for this guy to take the reins and step up and show what he can do from a stoppage sense, I don't think we've seen the consistency in this area of his game before, and as a result of him getting more inside midfield minutes.
Hodgie was strong last night on too much focus on Lachie Neale from Willem Drew, and Willem Drew being in the middle on Lachie Neale, robbing some of their other better stoppage players from getting exposure,
minutes,
like the Brownlow medalist.
It's and probably Kane's probably the best person to ask here as well. Like I would have thought that's the constant wrestle between what you do with a player like a William Drew and how hard you actually go to that. And I would have thought sometimes you can manipulate that matchup if you like, if you're Brisbane. I remember in the 2013 grand final, and Ryan Crowley goes straight to Sam Mitchell, and I remember reading Hawthorn's book post that grand final. They said we knew what was going to happen, and we were able to manipulate the magnets to get the stoppage game that we actually wanted as a result. So I can imagine it is a constant conversation.
Yeah, it's hard to be too critical because he's just torn them apart.
Yeah.
So if they didn't do that, as I said to Hodgie, I would have been critical of that. But I thought Neale handled it better. He went and put himself to Butters and a bit of confusion, and they've just got more options through the midfield now to step up. But yeah, I don't think there'll be a tag on anyone from the Giants this week. Hoyne, what do the Saints need?
Yeah, so there's a fair bit of discussion, obviously, around Liam Henry now coming to the footy club and and what that's going to do for St Kilda. The only thing I'll just say around that, if I'm St Kilda, is just be wary in terms of what you're giving up. I wouldn't be giving up anything high end for Liam Henry. Based off our 100X model, sort of this year, he's the 30th rated wingman in the competition. So he's going just below expectations. So he's not a horrible footballer, by any stretch. But I wouldn't be giving up a top 20 pick, for him. So
top 30.
I'll be sort of really close to the 30 mark. I wouldn't be just jumping at this just to get him through the door, if you like. So I think the exciting thing for St Kilda is that Ross has mentioned this throughout the whole year, that it was a year of experimentation, if you like, for him to have a look at the list. And I think as the year went on, clearly a lot of people are talking about their midfield and the injection there, and that's pretty obvious, and that got exposed against GWS on the weekend. The two kids for me that I'd be keeping an eye on for GWS is what Mitch Owens is going to do in there as a midfielder. I think, and maybe this is a bit over the top, I think Mitch Owens has Nat 5 qualities about him. So whether or not he can get to that level, only time will tell. But he had played a lot more midfield minutes, sort of to end the year. And then Philippou is the other one as well. So they do have high-end talent that they can inject in there, whether or not a Wanganeen Malera gets injected in there as well to actually just give that potency and,
I think Ross will keep him across the half-back flank.
Yeah, no, he could, but they do have the options there to actually experiment as well. So they're obviously really keen to go to the draft. Liam Henry's going to come in. That's fine. Just be, just be a little bit wary in terms of what you actually give up in there, because they don't have too many good ball users going inside 50. Henry's an okay ball user, but he's not an absolute, sort of pure kick.
And the Swans?
Well. And then the Swans, well, clearly, they're going to need a ruckman. So that was interesting there from Sam Landsberger last week when he reported that Brodie Grundy's likely to get to the Swans. So that would make sense to me. The area of concern, I think for the Swans, which they need to investigate over the off-season, is what they're going to do behind the ball. So to be the 4th easiest team this year to score against from clearance, to me, that I have the theory that if you're getting scored against from stoppage, that's when your defenders are exposed one-on-one, at their most, if you like. So, to be the 4th easiest team to be scored against from clearance, yes, a lot of that is off the back of their poor clearance work. But I'll be having a look at one of those key forwards.
Logan McDonald
or a Joel Amati. Hayden McLean, leave him there as as that key forward second ruck type, but I'd be having a look at Amadi and having a look at Logan McDonald and seeing what they do behind the ball. Because, if Tom McCartan can perform to the level that he did on elimination final night, you can lock him away for 10 years.
Yep.
Have a look within first before sort of being prepared to pay the big bucks on someone like a Harry Mackay or a Sava Radagalier at 700 to 800, which is sort of extraordinary money if you like. I think have a look at your list within to see if you can improve.
Can Lewis Melican do the job longer term?
I think Lewin, I think he's an honest footballer, but I reckon ideally in a premiership team, you're probably wanting to go past him.
All right, Hoyne, a couple of quick questions before we let you go. Does Hoyne give Carlton or Melbourne a chance against Brisbane at the Gabba?
I'm a bit like you, Kane. I give Melbourne a really, really big chance should they get through Carlton this week. I've said this before. I think Melbourne are the hardest team to crack in the competition. And, despite Collingwood winning on the weekend, they had to fight and fight and fight. I think Melbourne are the ones that can give Brisbane an almighty shake. At the Gabba, Carlton are probably a little bit less confident on.
All right, and there's a couple of questions from Melbourne fans just wondering, because there's a deeper dive into inside 50s. Can you break it down? Shallow inside 50s versus wide inside 50s versus the number that went deep and the correlation between what happens when you get those versus scores.
Yeah, no, great question. So we have a look at shallow and deep, which we're looking at going inside the 35. So 0 to 35 is what we call deep, and then 35 to 50 is what we call shallow. So AFL average for deep entries is 54% of the time. Melbourne actually went deep 61% of the time against Collingwood. So it wasn't their shallow entries which were an issue. It was what they were actually getting from their deep entries. But then also just the lack of corridor entries is what actually stood out to me. So only 1 in 5 of their entries came from the corridor, where the AFL average is about 1 in 3 of your entries come from the corridor. So wide entries, going long, going deep, that to me is a system which is designed to help you play the forward half game and continually get repeat after repeat after repeat.
It's also coupled with how many people are in that deep area, isn't it? Which is determined by speed as much as anything, although it could be on repeat entries. As always, Hoyne, you've been most enlightening. The doctor is about to leave the building.
Good luck, you two. I think there's a fair bit happening over the next period of time.